Next on the SEC in 60, we talk the two forgotten teams in the SEC Western Division, Texas A&M and LSU, schedule and personnel breakdowns, and of course, we've got to talk quarterbacks with the Aggies and the LSU Tigers. Plus, we talk SEC top 5 defensive backs, as well as who will be our X factor this week. The SEC in 60 right now. All right, everyone, thanks so much for joining us for the SEC in 60. This is our 15th show, and we are pumped every weekend just to get to Monday. That's not typically the case for most people, but pumped to get to Monday to talk about SEC football for at least 60 minutes.
Doing just fine, Mark. Pumped. 17 days until college football is back on TV.
I hesitated mentioning to everyone that it's 17 days because I figure if you're watching this show, you're locked in, you're hardcore, you know it's 17 days to SEC football. On that Thursday night, of course, it's going to be Ole Miss and Boise State, a game that's a little bit under the radar compared to South Carolina and Texas A&M right now, but I kind of like that matchup as well. And again, the Aggies and the Gamecocks, and we'll talk some Texas A&M football in just a minute, and specifically who's going to be that quarterback that's going to have to face that hostile crowd in Columbia, South Carolina. All right, Stephen M., before we crank it up, we would like to talk about the content that we've got available here on Mark Rogers TV throughout the week. So, for example, you are watching the SEC in 60 here at 1 o'clock Eastern, noon Central. This isn't a one-time deal. This is each and every week. Would like to let you know, though, as well, that it's not just something that you got to catch live. The video will be available very quickly on my YouTube channel, MarkRogersTV.com, as well as, again, the YouTube channel, Mark Rogers TV. So that's the SEC in 60. Plus, we deliver it to you as a podcast. So if you jump on the treadmill, do your chores, do your thing, you can listen to us, and that's released every Tuesday morning, the SEC in 60 podcast. Then we've got another college football podcast that we release every Friday morning, and we delve into the rest of the Power 5 conferences. Last weekend, we talked some North Carolina football with Jeff Greenberg. We talked with some of the top bloggers across the country, Bleacher Report, SB Nation, all over the place, college football, Power 5 conferences. That's delivered to you every Friday morning in podcast form. Then, of course, follow me on Twitter. Follow Stephen M. on Twitter as well. We love to talk college football and do it nonstop. You can catch Stephen M. Smith at ESPN_future. I'm at Mark Rogers TV, and we've got a poll question we deliver each and every day. So yesterday, for example, it was who's going to win the Big Ten? Got a lot of votes back and forth with Michigan State and Ohio State. Would have loved to have seen a wild card jump in there, but it was all Michigan State, Ohio State on our daily poll question. We've been doing that for 2 months, and the response has been tremendous. Plus, we've got video releases going on all the time. Video releases. Right now we've got top 5 positionals at each unit in the SEC, top 10 across the country as well. Positional rankings. I'm knocking out Stephen M. I don't know if I'm going to make it to the wire, but I'm knocking out schedules for each team in Power 5 conference football. So all of them, about 65, 67. I'm about halfway done. I'm trying to make it to the finish. 17 days left, so I cranked out like 3 yesterday. So schedule previews for everybody in Power 5 conference football. And then, of course, we bring on bloggers constantly, most notably recently USC, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and some others as well. All right, let's jump back to the SEC and let's talk some LSU football, Stephen M., because this is a situation where this team is never going to be under the radar completely. But in terms of LSU standards, people not talking about LSU competing for a championship this year in the SEC. It's more focused on Bama, of course, and Auburn coming off the miraculous season last year. With LSU, in my opinion, in looking at this situation, I think overall from a program standpoint, hey, Les Miles is still dealing with the haunting shadow of what Nick Saban built 10 years ago. He comes to LSU. That was a 500 program year in, year out. Nick Saban built it to be what it was, won the national championship in 2003. Les Miles took over, has done a tremendous job, but Saban comes back in the division, and ever since it's been a recruiting war, and they have arguably been the 2 top programs in the SEC ever since, LSU and Alabama. And it seems as though, and I'll get your take on this, it was that 2011 championship game, Stephen M., where LSU pulled off the game in Tuscaloosa. Then Bama comes back and wins the championship game in resounding fashion, 21-0. We all expected a great game, and Bama really laid down the lumber, and it's been Alabama ever since, dominating LSU. And Les Miles and LSU just trying to keep up with the Sabins at this point.
They're trying to keep up with the Sabins, Mark. When you talk about this season, LSU's kind of going through a little bit of a rebuilding process. Zach Mettenberger now in the NFL. You have the quarterback battle between Brandon Harris and Anthony Jennings. And on top of that, you have receiver Malachi Dupree. But outside of him, we don't know who's going to be that next guy to step up. At the running back position, you have Terrence McGee. You have freshman Leonard Fournette. And you have running back Kenny Hilliard. But you don't know who will be the rest of the pieces coming in for LSU. Defensively, you have defensive back Jalen Mills returning, but defensive coordinator John Chavis has always been known for having those big bodies on that defensive line, and in the linebacking core, lost the linebacker last year in the Layman Barrow, lost Ego Ferguson on the defensive line. So LSU is going to kind of have to regroup.
Yeah, regroup right there. You see our second bullet point, replacing the stars. They lose the 2 NFL wide receivers, the NFL running back, the NFL quarterback. That LSU offensive attack, if that could have been merged with some of the defenses that they had in the past, that could have been the best team in the country because they were loaded at the skill positions on offense. But replacing those guys is going to be difficult, as we will know. And Les Miles has been very upfront about that, specifically at Media Day, saying, I need wide receivers to step up. Trayvon Durrell's a senior who hasn't gotten a whole lot of playing time up until that Arkansas game to close out the regular season last year. 7 catches, $145, a couple touchdowns for him last year, caught the game winner against the Hogs and really saved LSU from embarrassment there. But it's the big freshman, Malachi Dupree, that everybody wants to see. I don't necessarily know that he's going to get the reps right out of the gate. But Les Miles is talking about guys like Tony Upchurch and DJ Clark having to carry the load. And they've got a tight end situation with a guy, Deshaun Smith, who could be an up-and-comer as well. He's a Jimmy Graham-type tight end. So we may see more production out of the LSU tight end position because of the youth and the inexperience at wide receiver than we've seen in a long time there at LSU. And, of course, we've got to touch really quickly here, Stephen M., on the quarterback situation with Brandon Harris, and it looks like it's Anthony Jennings' battle to win right now. It looks like it's in his hands, but Brandon Harris is going to be breathing over his shoulder the entire season unless Anthony Jennings can really kick it in. I think what we saw in the Outback Bowl against Iowa, where Jennings threw like 16 or 17 passes, is going to be LSU football, at least out of the gate, until Jennings shows that he can deliver the football downfield, that it's going to be a tight-knit system coming out of the gate. Run the football, don't make mistakes.
Don't run the football, don't make mistakes, but I'm not counting Anthony Jennings. I'm not counting Brandon Harris out of the situation just yet, Mark. You talk about Brandon Harris, a very competitive guy, competent quarterback, capable of making the throws downfield. Now, Anthony Jennings, as you mentioned, had a great Outback Bowl, but I'm not counting Brandon Harris out of this conversation. He's a guy that not only can pass the football well, but is great with his feet in the pocket, knows how to scan the field, and Coach Cam Cameron, offensive coordinator Cam Cameron, loves Brandon Harris. But you talk about Anthony Jennings, a guy that played a lot last year, got a lot of experience last year, got his feet wet last year. So expect him to get the nod, but as the season goes on, expect Brandon Harris to gain more confidence because I love what he brings to the table.
And you mentioned Cam Cameron at offensive coordinator. This is a guy that loves to mold raw quarterback talent. So he almost salivates at this type of situation where he doesn't have the polished passer. He wants to mold this guy, and he's looking forward to this this challenge of getting quarterback production out of these two guys this season against some of the best defenses in the country. They better be ready out of the gate. They don't start with a cream puff. They start with Wisconsin. The Badgers have their own issues, only returning 9 starters, but at the same time, Wisconsin's going to be ready. It's going to be the game that I want to see in Week 1 at Reliance Stadium in Houston. The SEC and the Big Ten have put together a series of games on neutral fields here in the first few years, coming up with Alabama and LSU and Wisconsin involved, and that's going to be really fun to see as we check out the schedule coming up this fall. for the LSU Tigers. Again, it's Wisconsin right out of the gate. Stephen M., your thought about the first chunk of that schedule, because it's Wisconsin, then you might as well call it a couple bye weeks after that with Sam Houston State and Louisiana Monroe. But I'm not going to knock the LSU Tigers, because if you schedule the one heavyweight, that's all we can ask for. Then they start conference play against Mississippi State, a team that's really a dark horse and really going to cause some issues for some of the top teams in the SEC Western Division.
But when you talk about Wisconsin first, Mark, you said they only returned 9 starters on that team. But Wisconsin's offensive line is known for being big, maulers up front, protecting the quarterback, but also setting the edge in the running game for Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon, not only a Heisman candidate, but he's a Doak Walker Award candidate, a very physical back that can get to the outside, but is very good at running in between the tackles. Wisconsin has a pretty solid wide receiver core returning. They have a good defense, not a great defense, but a good defense. I look at this game against LSU, it's going to be a close ball game. It's going to come down to which quarterback can make the right decisions with the football and put his team in position to win that football game. This is going to be a defensive battle, a pound-the-ball battle, and a battle of which quarterback can make pinpoint passes.
We can almost call that game against Mississippi State on September 20th a bit of an elimination game, because neither LSU or Mississippi State is generally expected to challenge for first place in the Western Division. But I think if one of them emerges, and one will from that game, obviously without a loss, then they could possibly stir up some trouble for the big boys, Auburn and Alabama. And then it's 2 weeks later. It's the only team that defeated Auburn en route to the BCS championship game last year, going to the Plains to take on the Auburn Tigers. So LSU and Auburn, regardless of the preseason hype or expectations, is always a fun one when those two get together, and always means a whole lot in the SEC Western Division. So the meat of this schedule, Stephen M., what do you look at there? Obviously, it's LSU, it's Auburn, but it's also that Florida game, and we expect the Gators to be much improved as well.
The meat of that schedule is going to be difficult, Mark. You talk about Mississippi State. As I said last week on the show, this could be the year for Stark Vegas. This could be the year for Cowbell Nation with Dak Prescott, Jameson Love, Tavez Calhoun, Jamian Lewis, that whole crop of talent that is in Mississippi State and Starkville. This could very well be the year for Dan Mullen. The question is the consistency. Can they be consistent on the offensive side of the ball as well as defensively? When you talk about Auburn, they were the only team on the Plains that LSU did beat Auburn last season. You talk about returning to face Auburn. It comes back to Anthony Jennings, Brandon Harris, the quarterback play, the running back play, the defense. Can they slow down the Auburn offense as unorthodox as it is under Gus Malzahn? Can LSU slow down the likes of Nick Marshall, the running game with Cameron Artis-Payne and Corey Grant, the wide receiver core of DeQuil Williams and Sammy Coates? Also for Auburn, a pass rush. Can they generate a pass rush against LSU? Because we know no more Nosa Igwe, no more D Ford, possibly no more Carl Lawson. Gabe Wright is still there, but can Auburn generate a pass rush against LSU? Also for Auburn, the fact that Robinson Thorezi is back, huge. The fact that Jermaine Whitehead is back, huge for Auburn's secondary. But the meat of LSU schedule is going to be difficult. But I wouldn't put it past John Chavis and Les Miles to get it done.
Yeah, and as we check out the closing stretch for the LSU Tigers, it's always difficult in the SEC, but at least they've got a bit of a break in there, here and there. They don't have a killer stretch of consecutive games. They've got Arkansas and Kentucky sprinkled in to give them a bit of a break. But all in all, again, I love to look at the non-division games to see the barometer of the difficult level of these schedules. And for LSU, it's the non-division rivalry with Florida that they always have to play. Now they catch a bit of a break this season, taking on Kentucky in the other division, where last year and over the previous years it's been South Carolina. It was Georgia last year going to Athens. So this year they get Kentucky out of the SEC Eastern Division. That could help them out considerably, although the Wildcats improving very much. And then the stretch drive is pretty difficult, Stephen M. When you talk about Ole Miss, a team that beat LSU in Oxford last year. Then they got the Crimson Tide, got them at home. Then they go to Arkansas, and the Hogs gave them all they could handle last year. Then they go to Texas A&M to close it out. So 4 very difficult games to finish things out for the regular season for LSU.
4 very difficult games, Mark. I'm going to go back to the Florida game right here. You're talking about Carl Roper coming in as the offensive coordinator for Florida, trying to help out with Jeff Driscoll, would mold him a bit more. Florida on the defensive side of the ball with Vernon Hargraves at defensive back, Dante Fowler, and on the defensive line, their job, Dante Fowler is going to want to bring pressure on Anthony Jennings and try to rough him up a bit at that quarterback position. You look at the Alabama game. It's on Bourbon Street, Mark. It's in Louisiana. It's in Baton Rouge. That hostile crowd in Death Valley and Tiger Stadium every year. The question for Alabama, Jacob Coker or Blake Sims, whichever one of them starts, can they go into that hostile environment and control it? In this game for Anthony Jennings, can he come in, be composed, make pinpoint passes? Can LSU run the football and play accurate defense in that game? You brought up Arkansas. Baby, it's the battle for the golden boot between Arkansas and LSU. For the Arkansas Razorbacks, you have Brandon Allen at quarterback. Another confidence boost game for him. Can he be able to move the football? You have the running back tandem of Jonathan Williams and Alex Collins. Can the offensive line block up front? These are huge games coming down the stretch for LSU. And last but not least, the Texas A&M Aggies with Kevin Summerlin, the quarterback battle between Kyle Allen and Kenny Hill. Which one's going to start? Texas A&M brings back DeShazer Everett, but can the Aggies finally get a defense around him? These are the questions that have to be answered, Mark.
Looks like a 9-3 football team to me, which in the SEC is no joke. Again, not my final prediction. Don't close the book on me for LSU. I will do that days leading up to the season. But right now for the Tigers, I'm looking at 9-3 because Alabama at home is going to be difficult. And then when you clump together Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Texas A&M, you got to figure they lose one of those games, possibly Florida. They're going to be an underdog at Auburn, although I think you did a nice job, Stephen M., of outlining the issues that the Auburn Tigers have leading into this season. They're kind of a troubled football team right now. Let's see how they respond out of the gate. But by week 6 or 7, we're going to have a take on whether Auburn's established themselves as an elite program, an elite team, in the SEC Western Division. All right, they finish up with Texas A&M. Then we expect, of course, LSU to be back in bowl play right after that. We mentioned the Aggies. We want to talk Texas A&M football next, Stephen M., because it's been all about Johnny Manziel. Anybody that sniffs college football over the last 2 years has known who Johnny Manziel is. We saw him the other night against the Detroit Lions. At least I did. That was must-see TV for a lot of NFL fans or even fringe fans to check out what's Johnny going to do. And I tell you, this kid impresses me when he steps on the field. Say what you will in regards to how he leads his life off the field, but he is a playmaker, and I expect him to be the quarterback for the Cleveland Browns within the first quarter of the season. But at Texas A&M, hey, enough about Johnny. They're going to put his name on plaques and on stadiums and do all sorts of things in the aftermath of the Johnny football era, but they got to deal with a quarterback situation that involved 2 extremely talented kids, Stephen M. You've got Kyle Allen. You've got Kenny Hill, the sophomore. Hill's a dual-threat guy at 6'2", 210. He was actually suspended during spring practice, something he had to clean up, some public intoxication issues. He passed out in a public setting, suspended for the rest of spring practice. But this kid's a 4-star number 8 dual-threat quarterback coming out of high school by 24/7 Sports. He got his feet wet with 23 attempts last year, 16 touchdowns against the lesser competition. But it's Kenny Hill versus Kyle Allen, kind of the heir apparent, the guy that they're pinning their hopes on, their dreams for the future. This kid's just 18 years old. He came on campus at 17 years old to learn the offense, enrolled early. Freshman, true freshman, coming out of Scottsdale, Arizona. Now, the latest reports I get after a scrimmage plus about 10 days of practice is that this is a dead heat for the quarterback position, but they want to figure things out very quickly. They don't want to name a quarterback the day before the South Carolina game on that August 28th. They want to have 2 weeks to say, this guy's the guy. We're going to give him 80 or 90% of the reps. Right now, their offensive coordinator, Spavital, says that each guy is reacting in practice and showing us their enormous talent, but they're also showing us the growing pains, that they rely on one guy. They're really looking for one receiver. It's their favorite receiver. They're kind of using him as a security blanket. They need to be more open to the entire field. They need to throw in rhythm. They need to, I think Spavital said something very key that I saw here recently, is that he wants to play up-tempo in spurts. So everybody thinks about Texas A&M playing up-tempo constantly, but he doesn't want to do that. He wants to give these kids a break, have them huddle up, have them stand at the line, and see things develop, and then play in spurts to surprise the defense, and so use the up-tempo sporadically. But it's Hill, it's Allen. It looks like a dead heat at this point, Stephen M.
Well, Mark, gone are the days of Johnny Pigskin, Johnny Heisman, Johnny Football, John Manziel. It's a new era for Texas A&M, and I don't blame the offensive coordinator for thinking that way. He wants to have the guys learn the game as it comes to them. Let the game come to them and don't force it. You talk about Kyle Allen and Kenny Hill, two very talented quarterbacks, two very talented players on one team at the quarterback position. Both guys are getting the opportunity right now. They both have vision. They both can scan the field. And when you talk about relying on one receiver, that's going to come with time. They have to be able to read progressions, be able to use the checkdowns, find out who the hot read guys are. That's going to come with time, and that's going to come with repetition. And it starts with huddling up, recognizing who your personnel is, and taking the game as it comes to you. We're not going to have a lot of these Johnny Manziel type players that are unorthodox and make just tremendous captivating plays. We're going to have quarterbacks, especially now with Texas A&M, that are going to be focused on letting the game come to them, learning the system, and actually breaking down the film.
And Kevin Sumlin is known for developing quarterbacks. So case in point at Houston, I know a different level of football there, but still big-time college football to a certain extent, with a true freshman in 2010 named David Pyland. This kid came out of the gate and threw 24 touchdowns, averaged 330 yards per game. So Kevin Sumlin is a tremendous recruiter. He's a tremendous presence on the field and in the program and everything he does. He's a character guy, but he also develops quarterbacks, and he understands offensive football. So to have a young quarterback in a difficult situation, it's good to rely on a guy that understands the quarterback situation and how to put that young quarterback in the best position to succeed, and Kevin Sumlin's the right guy to do that. Stephen M., let's look at the schedule for Texas A&M, because I have got to rail on this schedule just a bit as we look at the first game. Okay, so I want to make it straight to SEC fans. When I cut on these schedules, I understand this is the most difficult conference schedule in the country. I get that. It's the non-conference games that sometimes drive me crazy. Vandy's got no schedule, Alabama's got no schedule, and here's another one. So they've got the opening night at South Carolina, sure. And then in come the cream puffs, Lamar, Rice, and SMU. I don't mind the SMU game. They're in-state. It's a game that Texas A&M should play occasionally against SMU, and they're actually going to Dallas to take on SMU. But Lamar and Rice and SMU, and later in the season they got Louisiana Monroe. Play one tough non-conference game. They did the same thing last year. They played nobody out of conference. So again, let's slice up this schedule into thirds, and let's look at this first 4 games. But not a whole lot to talk about past opening night, Stephen M.
You got a lot to talk about past opening night. I mean, you open up, Texas A&M opens up with South Carolina. Yes, you open up with Dylan Thompson. You open up with Mike Davis. The questions for South Carolina being, how do you move on from Kelsey Quarles, Victor Hampton, Jadeveon Clowney, Jimmy LeGree? I mean, how do you move on from those players? Of course, they have J.T. Surratt coming back, but you lose very talented pieces on the defensive core for South Carolina. But after that, for Texas A&M, you mentioned SMU, Louisiana Monroe. You're not. They're teams that you just know that it's going to be a beatdown of a game. Now, SMU last year showed me a lot of Garrett Gilbert at quarterback, but Garrett Gilbert's in the NFL now. So you have to see what's SMU looking like, what's Louisiana Monroe looking like, what's Rice looking like. And I know a lot of these teams, need these cream puff games to kind of work the kinks out of the schedule, but sometimes you just have to schedule a good, solid non-conference game to really test the barometer of where am I right now going into the season.
And especially since we're in this college football playoff era where we're comparing teams across conferences, and once they step into conference play, it's difficult to compare. We would like to see like opponents non-conference play one another. A little plug here for Mark Rogers TV. We interviewed SMU head coach June Jones a couple weeks ago. Check that out. This guy is one of the big offensive minds in college football. He was at Hawaii. He was an NFL quarterback for a long time with the Atlanta Falcons. He runs a first-rate system in regards to running offensive football, creating mismatches, creating nuances that we haven't seen before, and he's trying to stay ahead of the defenses. But he's been one of the guys that has been at the forefront of the spread offense and of the passing formations that we've seen just explode in college football over the past 15 years, along with what Steve Spurrier did back in the 90s with the fun and gun. Let's look at this stretch drive, or the middle part of this schedule, I should say, with Arkansas, Mississippi State, and Ole Miss, and Alabama in there as well. So I think if you look at Texas A&M's schedule, they have two brutal three-game stretches. So this is the first one with Mississippi State, Ole Miss, and Alabama. Not that they can just walk through Arkansas on the road, because I think the Hogs are going to be much improved. But Mississippi State, Ole Miss, and Alabama, Texas A&M is going to have to figure out some things on defense before they get to that stretch if they want to succeed.
Mississippi State, Ole Miss, and Alabama, Mark, cornerback DeShazer Everett is praying, let there be some more defense outside of me. DeShazer Everett is thinking, let there be some other defense on the field with me. Because last season, despite his good year, Texas A&M was god-awful on the defensive side of the football. In every game that CBS broadcasted last year, there was a graphic saying that Texas A&M gave up 6.5 yards rushing a pop. That can't happen for Texas A&M to be successful defensively this season. And you talk about Mississippi State, Ole Miss, and Alabama. Those three teams love to run the ball. You got Mississippi State, who will run with Dak Prescott. You got Ole Miss, who's going to run with Artur Mathers and the other running backs that they have there. And, of course, with Alabama, with the three-headed monster of Yeldon, Drake, and Derrick Henry, they're going to want to run the football. Texas A&M is going to have to be able to line up in the box, stuff the run, and force the quarterbacks to make precise passes.
Yeah, this defense is atrocious. There's no way around it. It was the worst defense in the SEC last season, and Johnny Football and Mike Evans and company had to score 45 and 50 points a game to stay ahead of the defense. We saw a defense that stepped on the field, and I know Duke was explosive for the ACC, but any other respectable, formidable SEC defense wouldn't go into the Chick-fil-A Bowl and give up like 38 points in the first half to Duke. So it was really atrocious to watch Texas A&M struggle on defense last year, and you laid it out there. It starts with physicality, and they just didn't bring it to the point of attack last year. 6.5 yards a pop is about 2 yards more than it should be for a respectable defense, even against the offenses they were playing. And again, I will remind people that they played 4 cream puffs non-conference, so that stat was even kind of supported a little bit by playing a lesser than difficult non-conference schedule. If we look at the back 4 games of this schedule in 2014, again, it's the final 3 games that they're probably going to be, if they didn't have the easy 4 wins non-conference, which is going to get them to a bowl game most assuredly, because all they have to do is go 2-6 in the SEC to make a bowl game and get to that 6 wins. They would be struggling otherwise to possibly get to a bowl game. And I know that this team and this roster, as we look toward 2015 and 16, should probably explode on the scene, because let's see if these young players that have been recruited by Kevin Sumlin in the last 2 recruiting periods can make a statement and make an impact on defense, because that's the wild card out there, because this defense could be much improved just based on the hordes of recruits that they've brought in on that side of the football that are first-rate 4- and 5-star guys. So let's not discount that. They could have an extremely young defense that just hits a ceiling and just shows us something this year. Auburn, Missouri, LSU to close things out, Stephen M. Obviously a very difficult stretch, but I'm looking at Texas A&M probably finishing 4-4 in the SEC, and they go 8-4 because they've got the 4 games that they can handle non-conference.
I can see 8-4, Mark. I possibly see them sneaking by Missouri due to the fact that Missouri, no Michael Sam, no Coney Ealy, no E.J. Gaines, no Henry Josie. You have Matty Mark coming back with the 3 receivers and Dorial Green Beckham, LaDamian Washington, and Marcus Murphy all gone. So I can see Texas A&M possibly sneaking and getting Missouri. When you look at Auburn, that's going to be a tough ball game. I second that, Mark. I see Texas A&M going 8-4, 4-4 in the SEC.
And again, we didn't get a chance to dive in specifically on this defensive personnel, but you mentioned Shazer Everett, one of the best defensive backs in the SEC in the country, and some of the help that he's going to need. Again, the recruiting has been off the charts, top 5 in the country the last 2 years. Will these guys develop quickly enough to play in the SEC and build themselves up physically enough? Another big transition we see from high school to college to be able to stand up to the wear and tear of an SEC football game. We shall see if Kevin Sumlin, we know that he wants to push those young recruits on the field and get them playing time. And it could be a much different defense this season, and especially, I would expect, in 2015. All right, Stephen M. Hey, before we talk our X Factor, love this segment. Let's talk some Stephen M. and see what you got out there in regards to some of the content.
Well, the content I have right now, Mark, I've been working on, I just finished up outlining, recapping the Alabama scrimmage on Saturday, the downpour scrimmage, where we saw a very drenched Nick Saban take the podium discussing his thoughts on the scrimmage. The scrimmage actually had a 40-minute delay due to the rain, but after the smoke cleared, but talk of the scrimmage was Kenyon Drake, place kicker Adam Griffith, Alabama's defense, and also the wide receiver core that really put on a pretty good showing. Saban did not discuss the quarterback stats because he said that it would be unfair to evaluate the quarterbacks after the weather that was being had. He felt like you could expect some drop balls, some passes that both quarterbacks would like to have back due to the slick grip on the football. They were not able to grip it as cleanly as they would like to. I also did a piece on the top 10 freshmen to look out for this season for the Alabama Crimson Tide, and also recap the Alabama players on award watch list. Alabama has 29 players that have been named to award watch lists, and since 2008, Alabama has had at least one player to win a major college football award. This happens to be the longest active streak in college football.
So, Stephen M., we cranked up a segment here, about 5 weeks ago, because in college football, it's all about transition. You can't hang on to these guys for 10 and 12 and 15-year careers. They're here and they're gone. They usually, it's unusual to see a major college football player be on the field for 3 to 4 years. It's usually maybe 1 year, 2 years, and you've got to find the next guy. You've got to find the next group of players. So it's constant transition. So we've got a lot of unknowns in college football as we see some of the best players in the country move on to that next level. We see it at LSU. We talked the LSU wide receiver position at one point. Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry move on. Who's going to replace these guys? Now we talk some Alabama quarterback as being the X factor for this team. We know that this team is expected to compete for a national championship, but for the last 3 years, A.J. McCarron's been in place as the guy, and there was no concern, no question that he's the leader, he's the guy, he's dependable, he's proven himself, and we know what we get out of the quarterback position. Stephen M., now we got a situation where a national championship contender is relying on a first-year quarterback, and if you look through the other contenders or supposed and expected contenders for the national championship, you look to Florida State, Ohio State, Auburn, Oregon, UCLA. All these teams have veteran quarterbacks coming back who've established themselves. We know what we're going to get from these guys. At Alabama, they're breaking in a new guy, whether it be Blake Sims or Jacob Coker. So your thoughts about who could possibly be ahead in this race, and we're only about 2.5 weeks away.
The thing that I love about this race, Mark, it's competition. Competition breeds winners, and that's exactly what Nick Saban's about, competition and breeding winners. You talked about A.J. McCarron, a 3-year starter. He's won 2 national championships as a starter, one as a redshirt freshman in 2009, but he's in the National Football League with the Cincinnati Bengals. So you have Jacob Coker, a Florida State transfer, got here in May. He's been in summer workouts the whole time and now entering week 2 of Alabama fall camp. And then you have Blake Sims, a guy who's been a backup quarterback for 3 seasons, a guy who knows the playbook, highly experienced, knows the coaching staff and the team, around him. But the competition that's built up right now is when Jacob Coker signed his letter of intent to come to the University of Alabama, everybody expected Blake Sims to just roll over and let Coker have it. Not so fast. Blake Sims has come out fighting. Blake Sims has come out pushing. He's come out looking more improved. The fluidness of the arm strength, the confidence he's starting to exude more. We always knew that Blake Sims was a mobile guy, but the teammates love him. The coaching staff continues to rave about him. But what I love about Jacob Coker, he's grasped the playbook. The mobility is real. His ability to throw on the run. I saw Jacob Coker make a post route pass where he hits Christian Jones in stride. A great big-time arm, a big-time throw. Now, Nick Saban is going to play both guys to see which one really has the hot hand. And I figure by the Florida game, a starter for the rest of the season will be named. I feel like it's going to go back to 2011, where Alabama had Phillip Sims and A.J. McCarron. And the battle went towards Penn State. And after the Penn State game, then a starter was named, that being A.J. McCarron. So the battle will go until Florida. Saban will play both guys for West Virginia, Southern Miss, and Florida Atlantic. And then by the Gators, when the first SEC test comes to town, a starter will be named. But I got to give kudos to Blake Sims for not folding up and for not throwing in the towel. He's coming out pushing Jacob Coker, but Jacob Coker has also pushed him, and it's a battle to the end.
I like what you alluded to just a couple minutes ago, Stephen M. I think something that needs to be considered in all this, and I don't think Nick Saban takes it into consideration. He's going to play the kid that he thinks is performing the best, has grasped the offense, is going to make the right decisions on the field, and shows him the most talent in delivering the football and, again, making the right decisions, because everything else is in place to win football games around him. I think you touched on something, though, in regards to Blake Sims. He's a senior. He's been in this program the whole time. That his teammates like him. They enjoy being around him. They trust him. There's a bond there. Jacob Coker just came in, didn't even experience spring practice with his teammates, comes in the summer, and yes, they've heard about him. A couple guys may know of him and have probably talked to him. They go to all-star games. They do those sorts of things, so they cross paths. But Blake Sims has value with that team. He's made an investment in that program that's been gutted out for 4 years now, even though he hasn't been on the field much in games. Man, that camaraderie in the clubhouse, in the locker room, off-season workouts, he's got that established. He's got that equity with his teammates that Jacob Coker doesn't have. Now, does that play out on the field? Is there a trust factor? Do we see that intangible transition to a tangible on the field? Who knows? Because Jacob Coker's an enormous talent. One other thought here, Stephen M., and I got to get your take on this in regards to mobility. Is there as big a disparity as most people think with Jacob Coker not being a statue in the pocket? He's not Drew Bledsoe, but at the same time, Blake Sims giving you much more of a dual threat opportunity there.
I feel like Jacob Coker gives you much more of that dual threat opportunity at 6'5", 240 pounds. Jacob Coker can move. He can throw on the run. He can set his feet in the pocket and make smart decisions with the football. He has a strong arm, an accurate arm. He can make the back shoulder throws. What Blake Sims gives you is that quarterback that can run the zone read, can run the zone option keep, but also is that emergency guy. As I said, knows the playbook, knows what to expect, knows what Saban likes to see on the field. He's worked on his mechanics. He's worked on scanning the field. He's worked on the arm strength. But what he's worked on more is Blake Sims has worked on recognizing his personnel on the field. He's worked on hitting the guys that are 6'5" and taller, putting the ball up in the air and let them go get it versus working with guys that are 6'2" and small and shorter, putting the ball on their hands and hitting them in stride. So as far as mobility on the run, mobility throwing the football is Jacob Coker, but just that X factor, the ability to recognize the personnel on the field, is Blake Sims. As we mentioned, it's going to be a battle going into the first game of the season. Saban, as I mentioned, loves both guys, loves what both guys bring to the table. And as I've said earlier, it's going to be a repeat of 2011. And it's going to be which guy by that Florida game looks the most apart to play.
And there's a big difference here that involves the schedule. We break down schedules every week. Look at the situation that Kevin Sumlin's in with two very young quarterbacks, especially if he goes with the true freshman, Kyle Allen, versus the situation that Nick Saban's in with two fairly experienced quarterbacks, although they're new to playing on the field for Alabama. Nick Saban's got, sure, West Virginia's a formidable team, a Power 5 conference team. There's talent on the field. I understand that. But they're going to be a 4-touchdown favorite, close to that, against West Virginia. Then they've got the 3 games that you mentioned after that. They've got a bit of a cushion before they have to take on that Florida Gators defense, as opposed to Kevin Sumlin's situation where he puts a young quarterback on the field on the road in game 1 on a Thursday night, the SEC Network opener at South Carolina against the defense that was top 5 last year. I know that they're missing a ton of those guys, but still an SEC caliber defense week 1 on the road, possible true freshman, versus Nick Saban being able to break it in, knowing, hey, I've got the 3-headed monster at running back, I got a great defense, we're much better than the team on the other side, and he's got that growing period that he's going to be able to allot that quarterback going into that Florida game. I think it's a huge advantage for Alabama from that standpoint.
I think it's a huge advantage as well. You talk about 3 huge running backs in T.J. Yeldon and Kenyon Drake, Derrick Henry, and even Alton Tenpenny and Tyron Jones backing up the rear there. You look at offensive coordinator Lane Kiffin. He sat there and said on Fan Day that he's not trying to change the entire Alabama offense. So Lane Kiffin is going to run the ball. He's going to take pressure off Sims and Coker and allow them to calm down, let the game come to them, recognize who's open, which guy to hit, and how to handle the situation of where to handle the blitz, where to handle picking up the progression, how to handle throwing the ball away, and just letting the game progress and dissect it down. I think it's a huge advantage playing West Virginia. As you mentioned, they have talent on the field. And also keep in mind, the West Virginia game, Mark, could be the battle of who's the better Florida State transfer. West Virginia has named Clint Trickett as the starter. Clint Trickett also from Florida State. So Dana Holgorsen, a big factor in that no-huddle, high-spread offense, up-tempo key style. So Alabama's defense gets a chance to look at that no-huddle, up-tempo offense first game of the season to see how can they combat it, how can they slow it down. So this is going to be key for not only Alabama's offense, but Alabama's defense. How does Kirby Smart, defensive line coach Bo Wallace, linebackers coach Kevin Steele, how do they break down and really negate some of the big-time plays away from West Virginia?
All right, Stephen M. People love lists. I'm at the head of the line. Love lists. It creates great conversation because, hey, this guy should have been number 1.
Mark,
what are you guys doing? You guys know nothing about college football. You don't know what you're talking about. I hear that constantly when I throw these lists out, which is great.
Mark, I've made the list all summer long, so I can agree with you.
You're a list guy, too. So that's what we do in sports. We make lists. We look at stats. We rate guys. Fair or unfair. So I started off an SEC defensive back list that started with about 12 or 14 guys, and that's, again, with some superior talent moving on to the NFL from 2013. So I got my top 5. We'll run them down 5 through 1 here, Stephen M. You kind of chime in, and then I want you to deliver your top 5, and you let me know where I possibly missed it here, and I've got some other names as well. So we start on the Plains with Robinson Therese at Auburn. Guy with 57 stops, 4 interceptions last year. This guy came into the Auburn program as a dual threat guy, a dual position guy, I should say, running back safety. Obviously, Gus Malzahn was very adept at analyzing that he had pieces in place with Cameron Artis-Payne and Trey Mason at running back that he didn't need Thurese to play running back. We need some defense because the Auburn defense was atrocious in 2012 and even at the end of some of other Gene Chizik's teams after the Cam Newton year. So he needed this kid to play corner. He played some corner, and he got ripped apart. He moved into safety. Things completely changed for this kid. His big contribution last year, if you could go to one play that helped to turn the season for Auburn, and I'm talking way before the Georgia or the Iron Bowl. It was the Mississippi State game, of course, when they won on the last play, but it was also against Ole Miss in a tight game. He had a pick six to turn that game around. So he's found his niche at safety. Robinson Thurese I've got at number 5. He's a senior this season for Auburn. Number 4, Jalen Mills, a kid that we've talked about, got in some trouble with the law. He's back. He's going to be suspended, I believe. No, he's back with the team. I'm sorry. There was a possible suspension out there. Heard just the other day that he's being reinstated with the team. Missed about the first 5 or 6 practices. Jalen Mills is an exceptional player. He had 67 stops last year, 3 interceptions for a defensive secondary that always brings some of the best talent in the country, and a couple of the corners they have there are tremendous as well, with Tre'Davious White in particular, a 5-star coming into his own as well. And number 3, I got Landon Collins, a guy that's near and dear to your heart. Some of the former Alabama defensive backs that have now moved on to the NFL have made the comment that this guy's about as talented as anybody that's come through here in the last several years. 2 picks, 4 tackles for loss, 70 tackles from the safety position. Really more responsibility placed on him when Vinny Sunseri was hurt last year, and he had to step it up as well. Number 2, I got Cody Pruitt out of Ole Miss. This guy showed up in game 1 against Vandy, and it was one of the more hard-hitting displays by a defensive back I've seen in a while. He laid out Jordan Matthews on the next-to-last drive that really sent him to the sideline and sent him reeling. Cody Pruitt led the SEC with 6 interceptions and, again, had 71 stops. He's really a run enforcer as well, can play the pass and the run. And then when you talk about special athletes, and we've seen it recently in the SEC with Honey Badger and Tyrann Mathieu and those guys at LSU in particular, and some other guys we could talk about, Vernon Hargreaves at Florida is a unique special athlete that's just so fluid, can stay on a guy, stick on a guy, and to be named first team all SEC as a freshman speaks volumes. So just your thoughts about that top 5 and maybe some other guys that you would throw in there.
Mark, I love your top 5. You're going back to Vernon
Let's
Hargreaves.
stop right there, Stephen. I mean, love my top 5.
Hey,
I get the thumbs up on the top 5. Nice.
All right, but going back to Vernon Hargreaves, he reminds me a lot of Patrick Peterson from LSU.
Okay.
Vernon Hargreaves can return punts, can return kicks, but he's a knockdown defensive back. I love Vernon Hargreaves. You talked about Cody Pruitt. Guess what, Mark? He's a senior. You don't see many seniors. You don't see many players stick around for their senior years of defensive back. Cody Pruitt is like a second coach on the field. He's a senior. He's a hard hitter. He's a ball-hawking safety, as you mentioned, 71 tackles, 6 interceptions last season. Robinson Thurese was huge for Auburn last season. As porous as that defense was, when you had Jermaine Whitehead, Jonathan Menzie, and Robinson Thurese back there, it made a whole lot of difference. Thurese, 55 tackles, 4 interceptions. But one of the guys that I love, Mark, Tavez Calhoun, Mississippi State. Calhoun, huge last season with Nico Whitley and Jamerson Love. Now, Nico Whitley's gone, but Tavez Calhoun last season, 45 tackles, 3 interceptions, 7 pass breakups, and a forced fumble. Tavez Calhoun was major.
And let's go back to a guy that you mentioned about 15 or 20 minutes ago when we were talking Texas A&M, the senior DeShazer Everett, who's hoping to have to make less stops in the defensive backfield this season if he gets some help from his teammates. But he had 73 tackles in the defensive backfield, a couple picks, 7 pass breakups. Tre'Davious White, I alluded to him at LSU. He's a special athlete, a 5-star guy 55 tackles last year, 2.5 tackles for loss, 9 passes defense. We know that the defensive backfield at LSU is always going to be loaded with guys and special talent there. Braylon Webb is a kid that, with the success of E.J. Gaines at Missouri, got a little bit overshadowed, but he made a game-changing play in the Cotton Bowl to preserve that win for Missouri against Oklahoma State. He had 60 tackles. He had 3 picks as well for Mizzou. Alan Turner, a guy, this stat speaks not just to the ability of Alan Turner to get guys on the field, but that Arkansas back seven's got to be better this season. 97 tackles Alan Turner had as a at Arkansas, and that just can't happen playing free safety, and that just speaks to him catching guys 10 and 12 yards down the field, and Arkansas can't have that stat. He's got to have 25 less tackles this year. Brian Randolph, I love what Tennessee's done, especially when we talk about Butch Jones building a program. He has gotten to the point where he doesn't have it in line play until a quarterback proves himself. He doesn't have it there where he can compete for an SEC East right now. But at defensive back and wide receiver, he's recruited out of this world, top-level talent, and we see it with Brian Randolph, who's actually a senior at this point. So he's been a holdover from the Derek Dooley years. But Cam Sutton's a special player that could really make some plays for Tennessee as well. And again, they've got Brian Randolph. So Tennessee, man, if they could get some overachievement out of the line play and the quarterback, and I know that's expecting a lot, they've reached. I know that they want to get back to Tennessee football, competing for championships. Well, they have that level of talent at wide receiver and in the secondary defensive back. They have some really talented athletes at those two positions.
They really do, and Mark, they want to get back to the Philip Fulmer years of competing for titles and competing for championships, but it all starts with Butch Jones continuing to recruit and continuing to sell the Tennessee program on. We're going to get the utmost out of you. We're going to bring the best out of each and every one of our players and make sure that we're putting the right guys on that field.
All right, folks, it's Stephen M. Smith of TouchdownAlabama.net. Joins us just about every week for the SEC in 60. We have a good time here breaking down football, and in just 2 weeks, we'll give a big preseason preview, and as well, we'll get into the season after that, and it's great to talk SEC football anytime, but we'll get into the season and actually be able to talk about football games on the field and analyze what's going on there. And we want you to join in, tweet us, give us the comments, provide the feedback, give us your questions, your analysis, because you know your football team better than anybody. And so we need your feedback as well here on the SEC in 60. But remind you that we're on the air at 1 o'clock Eastern Time and noon Central every Monday, so you can catch us live. But we expect people doing stuff. You've got work. You've got things going on in your life. If you can't catch us live, of course, the video posts in just a couple hours on YouTube at my channel at MarkRogersTV, also at MarkRogersTV.com. And then, as a podcast by Tuesday morning, I promise to deliver it to you by Tuesday morning as a podcast as well, the SEC in 60. And just to plug a few other things that I've got going, we're going through every schedule in the country. Everyone, even Purdue, even NC State, regardless.
Even Purdue. Even Purdue
at 1-11. They're near and dear to my heart as a Big Ten team there in the Midwest that has dropped to hard times there in West Lafayette. So we're coming through every schedule in the country. We're about halfway done. We've got about 35 we need to knock out here in the next couple weeks before we get to the opening kickoff on that Thursday night. Top 5 at every position in the SEC. Stephen M. has joined the conversation on many of those. We've gone to Chad Niebling of SEC Sports Insider and Dr. SEC for some of those posts as well. So again, watch those, debate us, make your comments, give us your top 5 lists, every position in the SEC. And I'm also in the midst of, and I promise to finish this one as well, the top 10 at each position in the country. I've got to knock out those cornerbacks and those defensive backs, safeties, punters, kickers, and we are just driving hard to get to kickoff of South Carolina and Texas A&M on that Thursday night. All right, Stephen M., any parting shots for us?
No parting shots for today. Just looking forward to covering part 2 of Alabama fall camp on tonight as the freshmen take the field for practice.
That's good stuff. That's the future right there on the field for the Crimson Tide. Not that we expect Nick Saban to give us a whole lot about what's developing there, but we know that Alabama is well equipped for the future with the recruiting rankings showing us the way there. So it's Stephen M. Smith of TouchdownAlabama.net, and I'm Mark Rogers of MarkRogersTV, and we have a whole lot of fun every Monday. So please join us next week, or again, catch the podcast, catch the video replay on YouTube at MarkRogersTV. Marty McPadden doing all the dirty work behind the scenes, giving us everything we need. There he is, Marty McPadden from PodJam TV Productions, as well as so many platforms. Look him up on Twitter, Marty McPadden. Check out what he's got going. This guy, from an operational, marketing, technical standpoint, is unmatched out there. And my thanks go out to him for pulling this thing together and giving us a little cachet in regards to our production that we would have never achieved otherwise. So again, may God bless you. We'll see you next time on the SEC in 60.